You don't need more information. You need to stop leaking. That is the problem nobody names clearly enough. So let me name it now. While you are still sitting with the quiet discomfort of recognizing yourself in a sentence you weren't prepared for, you are leaking every time you explain yourself when nobody asked. Every time you refresh a screen waiting for a reply that will tell you whether your idea was good. Every time you soften what you actually meant because you could feel the room shifting. Every time you perform slightly more enthusiasm than you feel. Because you sensed the approval was conditional and you needed to secure it before it disappeared. That is not communication. That is hemorrhaging. And the world, the social world, the professional world, the intimate world can smell it. Not because people are cruel, not because they are calculating in the way you imagine they are calculating, but because every living system, every organism that has ever competed for resources or status or warmth, has been wired since the beginning to sense need, to locate it, to orient away from it. Need repels, not as a moral verdict, as a law of physics. Think about it. When did someone become more attractive to you after you saw how desperately they wanted something from you? When did your interest in a person increase the moment you watched them start monitoring your face for signals? When did you lean toward the person in the room who was visibly scanning for approval? Or did you lean toward the one who seemed, somehow, already complete? You already know the answer. You've always known it. The cruel irony is that the behavior you adopted to secure connection, the signaling, the over-explaining, the softening, the constant emotional broadcasting is the exact behavior that erodes the very thing you were trying to protect. That is the trap. That is the whole trap. And most people spend their entire lives inside it, never naming what is happening, only feeling the dull ache of doors that won't quite open, of rooms that never fully welcome them, of relationships that plateau exactly where real intimacy should begin. Listen carefully. What I am going to describe to you is not a technique. Techniques are for amateurs who want shortcuts to power they haven't earned. What I am describing is a shift in the internal architecture, in the deep structure of how you relate to outcomes, to other people, to your own wanting. Machiavelli understood something that his critics always misread. They accused him of teaching cruelty, of being the philosopher of manipulation. They were wrong, and the wrongness was revealing. What Machiavelli actually understood beneath the tactical surface, beneath the language of princes and republics, was a single quiet truth. The person who needs the outcome least controls it most, not because of strategy, not because of technique, because of what detachment does to you from the inside out, because of how it changes your posture, your timing, your face, the pace at which you speak, because of how it makes other people feel when they are near you, as though they are the ones who need to hold your attention, rather than the other way around. Detachment is not coldness. That is the first thing to understand, because most people confuse the two, and the confusion costs them everything. Cold people push others away through indifference. Cold people are actually terrified of being hurt, terrified of wanting something and not getting it, terrified of the exposure that comes with genuine desire. So they freeze, they build walls, they mistake numbness for power. That is not detachment. That is damage dressed as strategy. Real detachment is something else entirely. It is full presence without attachment to outcome. It is caring about the quality of what you do, deeply, while releasing your grip on how it is received. It is the difference between a sculptor who is in love with the act of carving, who is absorbed, focused, alive in the work, and a sculptor who keeps pausing to check whether the observer is impressed. The first sculptor produces something that lasts. The second produces something desperate. You felt it, didn't you, when you were doing something you actually loved? Something you were absorbed in without an audience, writing something for no one, building something in private, working on a problem at an hour when no one was watching. You were different. The work moved differently. You moved differently. There was a quality in your thinking, in your instincts, in the decisions you made. that simply was not available to you when someone was watching. That quality has a name. Machiavelli wouldn't have called it this. But the structure is his. It is non-reactive, creative authority, the absence of the observer in your mind. And here is what changes when you remove that internal observer, that internal audience you have been performing for since adolescence. Maybe earlier, your timing improves. You stop responding to things before they have fully arrived. You stop jumping to fill silence. You stop qualifying statements that didn't need qualification. You start letting pauses exist, which means you start letting other people feel the weight of their own uncertainty instead of immediately rushing to dissolve it for them. Silence is not nothing. Silence is pressure. And the person who can hold silence longer than the other person, not as a game, not as a calculated pause, but because they are genuinely at ease inside it, that person controls the emotional temperature of any room they walk into. Now watch what happens when you stop broadcasting need in a professional environment. You are in a meeting. Someone, senior, questions your approach. The old version of you felt the rush, the heat behind the ears, the scramble to defend, the urgent need to demonstrate competence before anyone could form a negative impression. So you talked. Maybe you talked too much. Maybe you explained every layer of the decision when a single confident sentence would have been enough. Maybe you watched their face while you were talking, adjusting your pitch in real time based on whether they seemed convinced, which meant your argument bent itself around their reaction rather than standing on its own ground. That is the leak. Right there. The new version of you sits with the question for exactly 2 seconds, not performing calm, actually calm, because you have done the work and you know what the work is worth. And their skepticism is data you can examine rather than an attack you need to survive. You answer once, clearly, without the tail, without the trailing qualifications. Does that make sense at the end? The upward inflection that turns statements into requests for permission, and then you stop. The silence that follows is not comfortable for them, and that discomfort, that slight repositioning they have to do to fill the space you left, shifts something in the dynamic that is very difficult to undo. Most people never notice this. They are so focused on defending their position that they don't realize the defense itself is the concession. The moment you scramble, you signal that you needed their approval. The moment you hold, genuinely hold. Not coldly, but with the settled weight of someone who is not in danger, you signal that their judgment, while noted, is not the ground beneath your feet. That is leverage, not manufactured leverage, not false confidence. Real positional leverage built from internal architecture. Here is the brutal truth about how social dynamics actually work. The part that is never said cleanly enough in any room you have ever sat in. People do not primarily respond to what you say. They respond to the state you are in while you are saying it. Your words are almost secondary. The content, the argument, the idea. The proposal is the surface. Beneath the surface is something that every nervous system in that room is reading faster than language. Are you okay? Are you stable? Do you need something from me right now? If the answer is yes, if even a fraction of your attention is monitoring them for signals of approval, they feel it, not consciously. In most cases, they couldn't articulate it if you asked them, but something shifts. Something in how much weight they give your words. Something in how much they trust what you are saying. Because a person who needs you to believe them is not the same as a person who simply knows what they know, and you can feel the difference. Think about the people who have moved you most in your life. Not the loudest, not the most impressive in the abstract. The ones who affected you. The ones whose words landed differently. Whose presence changed something in you. Were they performing for you? Were they watching your face while they spoke? Were they adjusting, softening, reaching for your approval? Or were they somewhere else, fully in what they were saying, in what they were doing? Looking at something you couldn't quite see, and you felt the pull of wanting to move into that space with them. That pull, that is what you are learning to generate. Not through imitation, not through technique, through actually becoming the person who is not waiting for your verdict. There is a word in power dynamics for what happens when you stop needing the outcome. you become attractive in the deepest, most structural sense of the word. Not attractive as flattery, attractive as a gravitational property. Things and people begin to orient toward you not because you have performed for them, not because you have made yourself available in every direction, but because you are no longer trying to move toward them. And the absence of that motion creates space that pulls. Nature abhors a vacuum. So does social physics. When you chase, you exhaust the field. You dissipate the charge. You make it easy, and what is easy to obtain is rarely what is deeply wanted. When you stop chasing not as a game, not as a ploy, but because you have genuinely redirected your energy towards something that doesn't require their participation, something quietly extraordinary begins to happen. The thing you are chasing starts to notice the direction you've stopped moving in. Be careful with this, because the first instinct, when you hear what I just described, is to weaponize it. To think, I will manufacture distance. I will pretend I don't care. I will perform the version of detachment that I believe will produce the effect I want. That is not detachment. That is theater, and theater always gets found out. The audience always knows when an actor is acting, even if they can't name what they're seeing. Something in the timing is slightly off. Something in the eyes is slightly wrong. The indifference has a quality of effort to it, which means it isn't indifference at all. It's inverted craving wearing a mask. And the people you are trying to influence, they are not sophisticated enough to articulate what they're sensing, but they will feel it as something vaguely off, something that makes them trust you a little less, lean toward you a little less, without knowing why. Performed detachment is more dangerous than obvious need, because it adds dishonesty to the equation. What I am describing is structural. It is built from the inside, not the outside. It requires that you actually redirect your investment, not pretend to redirect it, but genuinely place your energy somewhere that returns value to you, regardless of what any single person decides. This is where Machiavelli's real teaching lies. Stripped of the historical noise, he understood that the prince who could not afford to lose a particular ally was already defeated, not because the ally would necessarily betray him, but because the inability to afford the loss shaped every decision, made him soft in negotiations. He should have been hard. Made him concede in moments that required holding. Made him readable in a game where readability is vulnerability. The same principle governs your daily life with a precision that should stop you cold. The employee who cannot afford to lose this job negotiates from weakness, defers when they should push back, absorbs treatment they should refuse, and the employer, consciously or not, reads the dependency and adjusts accordingly, not out of cruelty. Out of the same instinct every organism uses to press where there is softness and yield where there is resistance. The person in a relationship who loves more not in the emotional sense, but in the dependency sense, in the sense of having no alternative to this specific connection, negotiates from weakness, makes more adjustments, absorbs more disappointment, accepts a quality of treatment they would never advise a friend to accept, because the alternative feels like falling. The creative who needs this particular audience's validation bends their work toward what will be received rather than what is true and produces, in the end, something that neither satisfies them nor moves the audience, because the audience can smell the compromise in it. In every case, the structure is identical. The inability to lose the thing produces the behaviors that make the loss more likely. Think about it. The neediness signals availability without standard, and availability without standard is not attractive. It is a cost, because things that require nothing of you to obtain feel worth nothing to keep. So, how do you build the internal structure that changes this? Not as philosophy. Practically, at the level of Monday morning, you build what I will call the parallel investment. You never allow yourself to be in a position where any single relationship, any single project, any single source of approval or income or validation is the only source. Not because you are calculating or cold or unwilling to commit, but because a person with one option is a person under permanent coercion. This is not about hedging emotionally. This is not about keeping people at a distance as a protective strategy. You can be fully present in a relationship, fully committed to a project, fully invested in a partnership while simultaneously maintaining the other territories of your life that do not depend on that relationship, that project, that partnership for their value, the work you do because it matters to you, the friendships that exist independent of your romantic life, the skills you build independent of your current employer's approval, the intellectual world you inhabit that doesn't require anyone's permission to enter. These are not distractions. These are the structural foundation that makes real commitment possible, because only a person who can survive the loss can truly choose to stay. Everything else is not love, not loyalty, not dedication. It is captivity with good lighting. Now watch what happens when you actually build this. The meeting where someone questions you, you are not afraid. Not because you have told yourself not to be afraid, but because you know that if this specific situation collapses, you have somewhere to stand. You answer from that ground, once, clearly, and the weight in your voice is not practiced, it is real. Because the ground is real. The negotiation where you need to hold a number, you hold it, not as a tactic, because you have done the arithmetic and you know what you are worth in other rooms. And the leverage is structural, not performed. The relationship where a boundary needs to be named, you name it quietly, without drama, without the apologetic preloading that signals you're already preparing to back down, because you have other relationships, because your sense of self is not housed entirely in this one person's estimation of you, because the worst case, while genuinely painful, is not the end of the ground beneath you. Boundaries named from strength land differently than boundaries named from fear. Fear-based boundaries shake slightly at the edges. They have a quality of pleading in them, even when they are stated flatly, because the body is communicating what the words are trying to hide. Please don't make me have to enforce this, because I don't know what happens to me if you don't comply. Strength-based boundaries have a different quality. There is no pleading in them, because there is no need for compliance. The boundary is simply a description of what is and is not acceptable, and the consequence isn't a threat. It's a fact, not delivered with heat, not delivered with coldness, just delivered. The way you might state the temperature in a room. Most people never reach this. Not because they are weak, but because they have never done the architecture work, never built the parallel investments, never developed the territories that don't require the approval of any single person. Never experienced the genuine internal freedom that comes from knowing you have somewhere to stand regardless of how any particular door opens or closes. Here is the brutal truth about most people's social strategy. It is entirely reactive. Something happens. They respond. The response is shaped almost entirely by the emotional charge of the moment, by the fear, the pride, the craving for approval, the terror of exclusion. The response is not chosen. It is triggered, and a triggered person is a predictable person. And a predictable person is a controlled person, not controlled by a villain, not controlled by someone consciously running a strategy against them, controlled by their own pattern, by the predictability of their reactions. Which means anyone who wants to move them has only to create the right trigger. Criticism lands, and the triggered person either collapses or attacks. Withdrawal lands, and the triggered person chases. Coldness lands, and the triggered person performs harder. The cycle runs itself, and the other person, whether they are aware of it or not, learns quickly where the levers are. This is the mechanism underneath most social dynamics that feel confusing or painful. You weren't manipulated by a sophisticated operator. You were read by someone, consciously or not, who found the reactive pattern and pressed it. The way out is not better defenses. Defenses are still reactive. The way out is the pause that lives between the stimulus and the response. Viktor Frankl called it the space. Machiavelli would have called it the prince's composure. I am calling it the only territory you can never afford to surrender. When something happens, criticism, rejection, provocation, coldness, flattery, sudden warmth, and you feel the familiar, pull toward the familiar response. Stop. Not for long. A breath. 2 breaths. The time it takes to ask a single question: is this response chosen? Or is it triggered? Because triggered responses give away information. They tell the room where your edges are. They show the exact contour of your hunger and your fear. And once someone has that map again, consciously or not, the dynamic is no longer a negotiation between 2 people. It is one person operating a system they understand, and one person inside the system who thinks they're making choices. The pause breaks the map. The pause is the first act of genuine strategic agency. Not because of what you do after the pause, though. What you do after will be better, more considered, more actually yours. But because the pause itself signals something to everyone watching: this person does not run on automatic. And a person who does not run on automatic is a person whose next move cannot be predicted with confidence. And unpredictability, in social dynamics, is a form of power that requires no performance, no status, no special position. You felt it, didn't you? The person in your life somewhere, at some point, who you could never quite read, who responded in ways you didn't expect, who didn't seem to need the thing you were offering or withholding, who was pleasant but not compliant, warm but not hungry. Did you lean toward them or away? You leaned toward them, because mystery is attractive in the structural sense, not as personality charm, but as a signal that this person's internal world is not entirely accessible to you, which means it is worth trying to access. The gap between what you know about them and what you might know becomes the gravity. And here is where the paradox lives, the one that most people intellectually understand but almost never actually practice. The less you need to be understood, the more people want to understand you. The less you need to be seen, the more visible you become. The less you need the conversation, the more people want to have it with you. Not as technique, as consequence, the natural consequence of a person who has developed a genuine interior life that doesn't require external validation to remain stable. That interior stability is not silence. It is not withdrawal. It is not performing mystery by being vague or unavailable. It is something more specific and more demanding. It is actually having a life of the mind, that you are genuinely absorbed in ideas you are working through, projects you are building, a quality of inner engagement with the world that is real enough to occupy you in the absence of an audience. Most people have never built this. They have opinions, not ideas, reactions, not positions, entertainment, not genuine intellectual territory that they own and are cultivating. And because they have not built it, the hunger for external validation is structural, not personal. It is not a character flaw. It is a vacuum that forms naturally in the absence of a rich interior life. And it pulls them outward constantly toward screens, toward reassurance, toward the social temperature of whatever room they're in a search for the feeling of substance that should be coming from inside. Building the interior is not a weekend project. It is the work of months and years of reading seriously, of thinking through problems that don't have immediate applications, of developing a perspective on the world that is genuinely yours because you have tested it, questioned it, revised it, not just adopted it from the loudest voice nearby. But here is what I want you to notice about that work the moment you are actually doing it. The hunger changes, not immediately, not completely, but the quality of what you need from other people shifts. Because you are bringing something to the table, something that didn't come from them. Something they can sense is not borrowed. Something that can stand without their applause, and that changes the entire negotiation. You are no longer arriving at a relationship with an empty cup, asking to be filled. You are arriving with something, and what you are offering is not performance. It is not charm. It is the real thing, an actual person with an actual interior, who finds this other person genuinely interesting, who is choosing this specific connection, not out of scarcity, but out of genuine preference. That is rare. That is so rare that most people have never experienced it and wouldn't know what to do with it at first. And that rarity is its own form of power. Now, I want to talk about reputation, Because everything I have described so far lives inside you in your pauses, your architecture, your interior, but you do not live inside yourself. You live in the world, and the world forms impressions, and those impressions compound over time in ways that are almost impossible to reverse once they have set. Machiavelli was precise about this. More precise than most people remember. He did not say be good, and your reputation will follow. He said something harder and more useful: understand that your reputation is a separate object from your character, and that you must manage both, because a man with perfect character and a destroyed reputation is less effective than a man of moderate character with an unassailable one. That is not cynicism. That is clarity. Most people treat their reputation passively. They do the work. They behave reasonably, and they assume the impression that forms in other people's minds will naturally reflect reality. This is one of the most expensive assumptions a person can make. Reputations are not formed by reality. They are formed by narrative. And narrative is not what happened. Narrative is what got told. How it got told, who told it first, and how it landed in the minds of people who were not present to witness the original event. This means that a person who does excellent work but allows others to narrate that work will find, over time, that the narrative drifts, not necessarily through malice, through the natural entropy of second-hand information, through the fact that other people have their own agendas, their own needs, their own blind spots, and those things color what they say and to whom they say it. Listen carefully. You cannot leave your reputation to other people, not because they are liars, but because they are human, which means they are interested parties. And interested parties cannot be neutral narrators. The question is not whether to manage your reputation. The question is whether you will manage it consciously or allow it to be managed for you by people who were not there, who do not fully understand, and who have their own story to tell. Conscious reputation management does not mean self-promotion. It does not mean campaigning for yourself, talking about your achievements in rooms where it lands as insecurity, or building a personal brand in the hollow marketing sense of that phrase. It means something quieter and more structural. It means being present in the moments that form impressions. It means letting your actual standard of work be visible, not announced. Visible. It means the consistency of your conduct over time, across contexts, becomes a story that tells itself without you having to narrate it. Because the most powerful reputation is the one where other people become your narrators, not because you instructed them to be, but because your consistency gave them material they could not help but repeat. Think about it. The person you describe to others when their name comes up in conversation and you say something specific and admiring, what did they do to earn that? Did they tell you they were exceptional, or did they show you, in a specific moment, a quality of character or competence or composure that you could not forget? That is the impression you are building toward. Not the impression of someone who is impressive, the impression of someone who is at some specific, memorable moment undeniably real. One scene like that is worth 100 self-descriptions. Here is where the dark warning lives. Because everything I have described, the detachment, the pause, the interior life, the reputation architecture will be tested, not in comfortable conditions, in exactly the conditions designed to undo it. There will be a moment of public criticism, not private feedback, public questioning, in a room where others are watching, where the power differential is visible, where the instinct to defend or collapse will rise with a speed and force that surprises you. There will be a moment in a relationship where the other person, whether consciously or not, applies exactly the pressure most likely to trigger your specific pattern, where they go cold at the moment you most need warmth, where they pull back precisely when you were beginning to trust the ground. There will be a moment when someone takes credit for something you built, not dramatically, not in a way that makes confrontation easy, quietly, in a room you weren't in a narrative that was already set before you heard about it. These moments are not interruptions of the strategy. They are the test of whether the strategy is real, because a detachment that only exists in comfortable conditions is not detachment. It is good weather. And good weather requires nothing of you. The architecture is only proven in the storm. The pause is only real when the provocation is genuinely designed to bypass it. The interior stability is only genuine when the external world is actively working to destabilize it. Be careful. The version of you that has read this and felt the quiet recognition, the version that nodded at the mirror lines, that felt the framework click, that version will be tempted to believe that understanding is the same as embodying. It is not. Understanding is the first step. It is necessary, and it is insufficient. The gap between understanding a principle and operating from it under pressure is filled only by practice, by the accumulated experience of having felt the trigger and held the pause, having felt the hunger and redirected the investment, having felt the pull toward the reaction and chosen the response. This takes time, more time than you wanted to take. And during that time you will fail. You will give away information you meant to hold. You will chase something you told yourself you had released. You will explain when you should have been silent. Defend when you should have been still. Perform when you should have been present. That is not a problem. That is the material. The failures are not evidence that the framework doesn't work. They are the specific data you need to understand the exact shape of your own pattern, where your edge is, what your particular trigger looks like, what specific flavor of provocation is most likely to bypass the pause and produce the automatic response. Most people never get this data because most people never name the pattern clearly enough to recognize when they are inside it. They just feel bad after. They just feel like they lost something, behaved in a way that didn't serve them, revealed something they didn't mean to reveal. If you can name what happened specifically, structurally, without self-punishment, but with genuine precision, the failure becomes instruction. That is the practice. Not daily affirmations. Not motivational scaffolding. The cold, clear examination of the specific moment where the leak happened. What triggered it? And what a different architecture would have produced over time. And I want to be honest about the duration, because false shortcuts are the enemy of real progress over time. This practice changes the baseline. The pause that was effortful becomes natural. The detachment that required conscious maintenance becomes structural. The interior life that was being built becomes the actual ground you stand on, not the project you're working on. And then something shifts in how you move through rooms. It is not visible in the dramatic way. Nobody will announce it. There will be no moment of arrival that you can point to. It will simply be that one day, you notice you are not monitoring the room anymore. You are not checking faces for signals. You are not adjusting your pitch in real time based on whether they seem convinced. You are simply there, saying what you actually think, moving at your actual pace, present, interested, alive in the conversation but not feeding from it. And the room will feel it. Not with admiration, necessarily, not with applause, with a quality of orientation that is quieter and more durable than admiration with attention. Real attention, the kind that isn't given as a courtesy, isn't performed as politeness, but is drawn out by something in you that cannot be entirely accounted for, that resists full prediction, that suggests there is more to find. That is what detachment builds, not distance, depth, not coldness, gravity, not the performance of not caring, the reality of having somewhere else to stand. And from that position, from that ground, life does not feel like a series of doors you are trying to open, each one requiring the right performance, the right degree of enthusiasm, the right amount of visible need. It feels like a series of choices. Some doors you open, some you don't. Some rooms you enter fully, some you look at once and walk past, not because you are above it all, not because you have achieved some cold transcendence that places you outside the human story, but because you have done the internal work that makes choice possible, that creates the actual freedom of a person who has options, who has ground, who has an interior life rich enough to sustain them in the silence between one room and the next. That silence used to feel like danger. Now it feels like space. And in that space, in the quiet between the wanting and the getting, in the pause between the stimulus and the response, in the moment after you have said what you meant and before you know how it landed in that space. You will find something that no approval could ever give you, the knowledge that you are not waiting for anyone's verdict to know what you are worth. That knowledge does not come from information. It does not come from success. It does not come from someone important finally seeing what you have always known was there. It comes from the practice, from the architecture, from the thousand small moments where you held instead of leaked, where you chose instead of reacted, where you stayed on your own ground instead of rushing towards someone else's. It builds the way real things build, slowly, quietly, without announcement. And one day the room notices that you are not moving toward it anymore. And the room begins, slowly, without quite knowing why, to move toward you.